The kind that made nations stop. The kind that felt like it came from somewhere far above human breath. But behind that heavenly sound was a life descending quietly, tragically into darkness. On the night of February 11th, 2012, inside room 434 of the Beverly Hilton Hotel, Whitney was alone. Music executives were gathering just floors below for Clive Davis's legendary pre-Grammy party, an event built on the legacy she helped create. Yet upstairs, the woman who once defined the word icon was drowning in a silence no one could hear. The police report would say she died in a bathtub. The toxicology report would say cocaine and sedatives played a role. But those who knew her best would insist nothing about Whitney's final hours made sense. She had bruises no one could explain. She had spent days acting paranoid, as if someone was watching her. Her security team claimed she was agitated, pacing, whispering that they were trying to control her. And then 3 years later, her only daughter, Bobby Christina, would be found the same way. Unconscious, in a bathtub, in circumstances so hauntingly similar that Hollywood still whispers about a curse. This is not just the story of a legend. This is the story of how the greatest voice of our time fell, and the mystery that refuses to stay buried. A woman built for the spotlight, destroyed by the very world that crowned her. A death that broke Hollywood, a truth that still hides in the shadows. This is Whitney Houston, and this is what really happened. Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born on August 9th, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey. But her destiny was written long before her first cry. She entered the world surrounded by music, expectation, and the weight of a legacy she never asked for. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was a powerhouse gospel singer. Her cousin, Dionne Warwick, was already a superstar. And then there was the shadow of Aretha Franklin, a close family friend who often visited the Houston home. Most children grew up learning to speak. Whitney grew up learning to sing, perfectly. By the age of 11, she was already leading the choir at New Hope Baptist Church. Her voice wasn't just strong, it was precise, pure, almost frightening in its clarity. People whispered that she was chosen, that God had placed something inside her that the world had never heard before. But inside the Houston household, talent was never enough. Cissy demanded perfection. She controlled Whitney's technique, her tone, even her breath. And for a child who only wanted to please her mother, Whitney learned a truth that would haunt her entire life. Love must be earned, approval must be fought for, and applause is the only proof that you matter. While other kids played outside, Whitney rehearsed. While her friends discovered who they were, she was being shaped into who she had to be. Every note was a responsibility. Every performance was a test. Behind the polished church girl image, Whitney was already struggling with insecurities, especially about her identity, her looks, and her place inside a world built on comparisons. And in a home with strict expectations, she turned to the only person who made her feel safe, Robin Crawford, her closest friend, her protector, her anchor. Their bond was deep, too deep, according to some in Whitney's family. Cissy Houston reportedly disapproved, pushing Robin out of the picture every chance she got. And as Whitney grew older, the message became clear. Her image had to be perfect. Her life had to be perfect. Her voice had to carry the family name. From the outside, Whitney looked blessed. But from the inside, she was already losing pieces of herself, forced to live up to a destiny she never had the chance to choose. Because Whitney wasn't just born into music. She was born into a machine. And once that machine began to move, it would consume everything she loved, everyone she trusted, and eventually, her own sense of self. By the early 1980s, Whitney Houston was no longer just a church girl with a miraculous voice. She was becoming a force that the music industry could feel, even before she stepped into the spotlight. At 19, she signed with Clive Davis, the legendary music executive who immediately recognized what the world would soon learn. Whitney wasn't just talented, she was inevitable. Davis polished her image, guided her sound, and prepared a debut album designed not just for success, but for immortality. When Whitney Houston, 1985, was released, it detonated across the global music landscape. No debut album by a female artist had ever done what hers did. Multiple #1 singles, 25 million copies sold, a voice critics described as the eighth wonder of the world. Her second album, Whitney, 1987, shattered records again, becoming the first album by a woman to debut at #1. Every track felt like an anthem. Every performance felt like a revelation. And then came that night, February 25th, 1991, Super Bowl X-25. Whitney walked onto the field and delivered the greatest national anthem performance in American history, a performance so powerful that it charted on Billboard as a hit single, a moment so defining that America seemed to collectively hold its breath. Whitney wasn't just a singer, she had become the standard, the blueprint, the unreachable bar set for generations. By the mid-1990s, she was everywhere, the star of The Bodyguard, the voice behind I Will Always Love You, the best-selling single by a female artist in history, a symbol of perfection, elegant, untouchable, divine. But inside the image of flawless success, cracks were beginning to form. Fame elevated her, but it also isolated her. Every move was monitored, every flaw magnified, every burden carried alone. And then, into the middle of this global phenomenon, stepped a man who would change the course of Whitney's life forever, Bobby Brown. Their love was real, electric, but combustible. Two different worlds colliding. Whitney, the polished diva shaped by discipline and control. Bobby, the rebellious R&B star fueled by chaos and impulse. For Whitney, Bobby represented freedom, a life outside perfection, a life where she could be imperfect, messy, human. But freedom came with a cost. And soon the world's greatest voice would be pulled into a spiral that no spotlight could ever hide. The rise was glorious. But every rise has a shadow, and Whitney's shadow was about to swallow everything. Whitney Houston had conquered the world. But the higher she climbed, the easier it became for the world to watch her fall. And that fall began the moment her private life became more captivating to the public than her voice. Bobby Brown, the love that set her free and set her life on fire. When Whitney married Bobby Brown in 1992, the media painted the story as the good girl choosing the bad boy. But in reality, Whitney was no saint, and Bobby was no villain. They were two wounded souls looking for escape. With Bobby, Whitney didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be the voice of a generation. She could laugh loudly, cry freely, curse, break, collapse, and no one would call her unprofessional. But freedom soon turned into chaos. Their marriage became a storm. Explosive arguments, jealousy, emotional volatility, violence behind closed doors. By the late 1990s, Whitney was no longer the immaculate diva. She was a woman fighting for her life inside a relationship that tore her apart piece by piece. The shadow of addiction did not begin with Bobby, but their union turned it into a battlefield. Whitney used drugs to quiet the pressure, to quiet the expectations, to quiet the silence of hotel rooms after the applause faded. Cocaine became both her escape and her anchor. Her weight fluctuated dramatically. Her once radiant face became hollow. Her voice, that once angelic sound, began to crack, and the world noticed. Performances were canceled, interviews became erratic, tour rehearsals turned into frantic attempts to keep her steady enough to sing. In 2000, airport security found marijuana in her luggage. In 2001, she appeared on Michael Jackson's tribute show, shockingly thin, a ghost of the woman the world once admired. But the most chilling moment came in 2002 during her interview with Diane Sawyer. Her quote became infamous, "Crack is whack." Her denial was too sharp, her smile too forced, her eyes too hollow. Whitney wasn't protecting her reputation anymore. She was protecting her addiction. The world began to turn against her. Tabloids mocked her. Late-night shows ridiculed her. Even Clive Davis couldn't pull her back from the spiral. And through it all, her family, and especially her mother, tried to intervene. But interventions are useless when a person is drowning quietly, beautifully, behind a smile. Whitney's descent wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow erosion. One line at a time, one lie at a time, one lonely night at a time. And yet, beneath the chaos, one truth remained. She was still Whitney Houston, still capable of rising, still searching for redemption. But redemption in Hollywood comes with a price, and Whitney was running out of time. By the late 2000s, Whitney Houston was a woman trying desperately to return to the surface. But the waves kept pulling her down. She entered rehab. She left Bobby Brown. She tried rebuilding bridges with her mother. She recorded new music. She fought for her daughter, Bobby Christina, who was now showing signs of following the same dangerous path. But trauma has a memory, and Whitney's trauma remembered everything. Attempting a comeback, and the world watching too closely. When Whitney released her 2009 comeback album, I Look to You, fans wanted to believe she had returned. Clive Davis believed. The media believed. But Whitney's voice was fragile, weathered by years of pain, drugs, sleepless nights, and stress that no superstar should carry alone. On tour, she struggled. Missed notes, strained high tones, shortened sets collapsing backstage. People whispered that the voice is gone. But what they didn't understand was the truth. Her voice wasn't gone. Her body was simply too tired to carry it anymore. Whitney's final week, erratic behavior, quiet panic. In February 2012, Whitney arrived in Los Angeles for Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy party, the most important night of the year for her mentor, and the most symbolic night for Whitney herself. Witnesses reported disturbing behavior. She wandered around the Beverly Hilton, sweating profusely. She argued loudly with staff. She looked paranoid, claiming someone was watching her. She had scratches on her wrists. She appeared disoriented, alternating between bursts of energy and exhaustion. A close friend later said, "She wasn't herself. She wasn't even close." Whitney spent her final nights surrounded by people, but utterly alone. February 11, 2012, the day everything ended. That afternoon, Whitney retreated to her suite, room 434. Inside that room, a series of events unfolded that have never been fully explained. The official report claimed she was found face down in the bathtub. There were bruises on her forehead, nose, chest, and arms. Water was so hot it scalded her skin. Cocaine metabolites were found in her blood. A white, powdery substance was found on a spoon and tissues. But this is where the mystery deepens. Why were there so many unexplained injuries? Why were the bruises fresh? Why were there reports of a loud argument earlier that day? Why did security say she seemed terrified? Police ruled it an accidental drowning, but many close to her, including members of her team, still questioned that conclusion. One bodyguard said, Whitney feared she would die the same way her idols did, suddenly, mysteriously, and in a tragic, chilling symmetry. 3 years later, her daughter, Bobby Christina, was found unconscious in a bathtub. Same circumstances, same uncertainty, same silence from the world. To this day, fans still whisper about the Whitney Houston curse. Others believe it was a pattern of abuse, control, and addiction that tragically passed from mother to daughter. And some believe that the truth about Whitney's final hours is still hidden, buried beneath Hollywood contracts, reputation management, and fear. What is certain is this: Whitney Houston's final days were not peaceful. They were a storm she fought alone, a storm she didn't survive. Whitney Houston's death did not silence her. It amplified her. In the years that followed, the world began to understand something that had always been true, but rarely acknowledged. Whitney wasn't destroyed by fame. She was destroyed by loneliness inside fame, and that loneliness echoed into the next generation. Bobby Christina. A daughter lost in the same darkness. After Whitney's death, Bobby Christina spiraled. She lived inside a grief so heavy that it blurred her reality. She withdrew from friends. She isolated herself. She leaned on the wrong people. She drowned in the same silence that once swallowed her mother. And then, in January 2015, the unimaginable happened. Bobby Christina was found unresponsive in a bathtub, a near carbon copy of her mother's final moment. 6 months later, she died. 2 women, a mother and daughter. Same fate, same mystery, same unanswered questions. Hollywood had no explanation. Fans created theories. Investigators pointed fingers. But the truth remained buried beneath grief addiction, and the shadows of an industry that consumes its brightest stars. Whitney's legacy. A voice larger than life. Today, Whitney Houston is not remembered for her downfall. She is remembered for her impact, an impact so massive it feels mythological. She became the most awarded female artist of all time, the voice that redefined vocal excellence, the standard every singer is still compared to the sound of an entire era, the emotional blueprint for generations of performers. Her music is played at weddings, funerals, graduations, moments of triumph, moments of heartbreak. Her voice remains a global landmark, instantly recognizable, eternally irreplaceable. Every singer who steps on a stage knows they are competing with a shadow that cannot be beaten. Whitney didn't just sing songs, she sang identity. She sang hope. She sang pain. She sang the human condition. And when she died, the world didn't just lose a performer, it lost a piece of itself. The final image, a legend caught between heaven and Hollywood. In the end, Whitney Houston was both a masterpiece and a warning, a reminder that brilliance often comes wrapped in fragility, a symbol of how fame can elevate and erase someone at the same time, a testament to how a voice can be powerful enough to move the world, but not powerful enough to save the person who carries it. Her story remains one of the most haunting in Hollywood history, not because of how she died, but because of how she lived, with a brilliance so rare that it burned her from the inside out. Whitney Houston will forever be the voice that broke the world, the woman Hollywood couldn't protect, and the mystery that time cannot silence.